So welcome to Peoria Riverfront Museum's Art Club, and thank you for joining. I'm Heather Placco, the program's manager, and I'm excited to be hosting Vienna-based German artist, Nina Gospodin, and Erin, Buczynski, Hattie Lee, and Heather Brammeier for today's Art Club presentation. Questions and comments are welcomed at the end of the presentation. And at that time, I'll invite you to unmute yourselves, or you can always type a question in the comment section and I will ask it for you. So we are suggesting also that you change your view to speaker view in the top right corner for the best experience with multiple speakers. And without further ado, a big welcome to Nina, Erin, Hattie, and Heather.
Thank you so much, Heather, for introducing us. And also thank you for letting us have this conversation here. It's actually the first time for me to host a talk in an art institution. So I've been really nervous, but also really excited. My name is Nina Gospodin and I'm zooming in from Vienna. I'm an artist and painting is quite interesting, important to my work. And I will introduce it a little bit and then you'll see why, because I created a stencil technique with which I create my paintings layer by layer. And this process reminds me of having a conversation. And conversations are also important to me because I run a podcast over here in Austria. In this podcast, I talk to artists and other creative people about how we do stuff, like what ideas we carry around with us, and how we approach them, and how we approach our ideas and obstacles and whatever comes with it. And that's why I'm also here today, because I get to talk to these three other artists and also curators about their show Seen But Not Felt. Yeah, and I think let's start right away by introducing the others as well. And today I saw Hattie's work on Instagram because she has her final show running, and that's why, yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, I'm Hattie Lee, and I just finished my MFA, Masters of Fine Art degree at Bradley University here in Peoria this semester. So I just finished with my final exhibition, and yeah, I am a multidisciplinary artist. My emphasis was in painting, but I do fiber art, engraving, painting, starting to get into some installation a little bit, and a lot of different mixed medias. I also have a background in graphic design too. And my work is inspired by my family heritage, and especially my Cherokee Native American standing in the Cherokee Nation tribe. And I think a lot about, like you've already talked about, Nina, the conversation. For me, it's conversation between communities or conversation between cultures. And I look and am inspired by many indigenous people groups. I lived overseas in Southeast Asia for a few years and was influenced by a lot of tribal groups there, and then came back here. And for my master's degree, I've been looking at a lot of my family's Cherokee history and that kind of thing. So I'm always thinking about cultures and collaborating and all of that.
Cool. Wow, that's really, really cool. And I read that you have spent 3 years in Thailand. And yes, my sister also lives in Thailand.
Oh, okay.
So I like that a lot. And Erin, you're an artist, but also the gallery director. And when I looked you up, I saw that you also think a lot about how to include new formats into galleries, right? Because you said in an interview that sometimes people don't experience the magic of galleries because they think they don't know enough about art, and I really like that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. I've met people who've had preconceived notions about what going into an art gallery looks like or can be like, and it can be very intimidating, I think, for somebody who's never ventured into that space. So I do like talking about how the gallery environment is one that should be inclusive, and luckily Peoria has really great programs outdoors too, to get people who are afraid of getting indoors accessible to artwork as well. There's a lot of public murals, and there's Sky Art Peoria, so there's some really great programming going on locally that helps reach all audiences. That's a big thing, reaching audiences that may not come on site to your venue. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
And then Heather, we are together in an artist collective, so I see you quite often, but you also, what do you do when we don't Zoom?
Well, I'm a professor of art at Bradley University. And so, yes, I'm the painting professor, but as an artist, I'm a painter, sculptor, and installation artist. And recently I've become very interested in public art. So I'm interested in some of the things Erin talked about, making art accessible. My new title that I've given myself also is an instigator of collaboration. So and Nina, you are one as well. I feel like Nina and I, we both like to instigate collaboration, because Nina is actually the one who inspired all of us to start our International Artists Collective. And so she and I, we've been discussing collaborations with that group. Erin and I used to be part of a collective together, Backspace Collective, which some of you might remember. And we collaborated quite a bit in actual artwork collaborations, as well as just in terms of the business side of it. And Erin and I have known each other for quite some time from working at Bradley. And Hattie and I have collaborated. We made a collaborative painting, and we're working on a collaboration with another artist, Eugene Mason, right now as well. Although we're not sure how many years it will take us to finish the collaboration, because so far it's going very slowly. But yeah, collaboration is a really, really important part of what I do, even if it's not something that you notice right away in my work.
Nice. That was also a main reason why I asked you to do this, to have this conversation together, because I thought it was really cool to see how you guys collaborated and had these like different perspectives, different locations on the exhibition, seen but not felt. But I think for everyone here, we thought that maybe we'll start by describing the exhibition a bit, and we have some slides as well. So maybe you could show us a little bit what we can see.
Yeah, so I will introduce us briefly. The title of the exhibition is Seen But Not Felt, and that actually came from some poetic musings by one of the artists, Lisa Nelson Raba. The curators are Erin Buczynski and Hattie Lee. The artists are Heather Brammeier, Larita Brammeier, Erin Buczynski, Alex DuPont, Heather Ford, Nina Gospodin, Nicole Grunwald Roller, Mia Congo, Hattie Lee, Nicholas Nyland, Dylan Paschke, Lisa Nelson Raba, Sydney Ryan, and Trish Williams. And the photos in this presentation are mostly from our campus photographer, Evan Temkin, and there are some that I took as well. And this program is supported by a grant from the Illinois Arts Council that Erin is responsible for securing for us. And Hattie wrote a brief description that she's going to read for us.
Seen but Not Felt is an exhibition born out of the impact COVID-19 has had on our society, which becomes reflected in our public spaces, empty galleries with paintings on the walls, but void of visitors to roam the floor and appreciate them. Artwork seen through computer screens or windows without the physical space being activated by human presence to complement the artwork. What does it look like to create an exhibition of art pieces that are made to exist on the floor, a space usually open and maneuverable, but not available for usual function anymore? Seen but Not Felt is a collaboration of artists across multiple mediums to create an installation in the Heuser Art Gallery that is designed to be seen from windows or on a screen. The space functions in a new way, just as we are all learning how to navigate space differently.
That is from the pathway, right, in the university, or what is the setting?
Yeah, the view you're seeing here, we have a second floor overlook hallway, which is also a student project space gallery. And it's got wonderful large windows overlooking the gallery. So the windows were really a wonderful place for us to be able to document this show because there was no floor space to physically walk in and document the show.
Mm-hmm. So this is also from a window, but it's from a window outside of the art center. And this is a view that you see walking up to the front entrance of the art center. So this was something that anyone can see, even if they weren't able to enter the building. This was as well, actually. I don't know if you guys who are familiar with this space can tell, but I think this also is taken from a window by our campus photographer.
And you could not enter the gallery. So all of that, you could only watch it from above if you were a student, and from outside, from the outside, it was available for everybody.
It mainly, the students did have the view that you're speaking of from the second floor and from the interior door that you can see up here in the left-hand corner. Students could view that. We really didn't have our audiences off campus coming onto campus at all because of the restrictions that the university had in place. So we created this exhibition to be primarily a virtual experience, and that the documentation of this show would be the experience that our audience should have. And so there was that added benefit for the students, but in reality, our intention was to share it to all audiences virtually.
This view was from one of the, from the doorway into the gallery space. And I'll just add, just to follow up on what Erin was saying, even though we all knew that the show would be viewed primarily virtually, it is something that could not have happened if the artworks had not been physically in the space. And Erin is to be admired because many gallery directors, when faced with this conundrum of how do we have exhibitions when we can't allow people in our spaces, many gallery directors either just closed the galleries, canceled programming, or postponed programming. Or there are plenty of tools to make online exhibitions without having the physical artwork in your physical space. But what Erin did, she continued bringing the physical artwork into the actual gallery space. And I know that for the artists, that is a much more valuable way of exhibiting artwork than if it were just photoshopped into a virtual space. So Erin, maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think when faced with, and thank you, Heather, when faced with the situation of deciding how we continue to do our programming, it became really obvious that there were a lot of artists suffering, a lot of opportunities that were diminished or had disappeared for artists, and the recognition that we really needed to do something to support those artists, and not only just support them through promotion and PR, because that benefits them and it benefits us too, but then also finding ways of providing monetary support for artists as well during a time when a lot of people were struggling. And so we utilized Illinois Arts Council grant to be able to provide honorariums for the artists involved. And so it really felt like it was our obligation to do something at the time to not only get the work out there and to really disrupt the way we normally use our gallery space, since we couldn't walk into the gallery in a normal way anyways, to do something creative with that, but then also create opportunities for artists that help not only the Peoria community, but since artists were from a larger range than just our local community, to help artists at large.
Nice. That's really cool. And I remember seeing photos of you guys setting it up, but I'm wondering, like, when did you get the idea, and how did that happen? How did you approach this project? Because oh, sorry.
Well, that's a great question. So I give credit to Heather Brammeier, because I think, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, I was starting to try and think about what we could do, and Heather was instrumental in making this happen. Heather, how do you recall the initial development?
Yeah, I was throwing out ideas, and I think I actually was just thinking I would do just like a quick little exhibition over the January term. And I talked about the possibility of work on the floor, but I remember there were other things kind of thrown in there. Remember, I was talking about flags and the Dred Scott piece, how to display an American flag. But Erin picked up on this idea of covering the floor with artwork, and we brought Hattie in on it right away because she was the gallery assistant, but she also is interested in curating art. So, and for Hattie, it seemed a natural. So right away she said, yeah, we need to cover the floor from, wall to wall, go all the way up to the windows, no floor showing. And so I think I kind of planted a seed that Hattie and Erin took, and it nurtured and grew. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, you guys are doing this, you're making this big exhibition, and we're really, it's not just, an impromptu thing like I originally was thinking. So, and in this image, this shows Hattie and I installed the artwork because Erin was not on site. And so this shows how we started making this huge collage, because we started by literally just covering the floor with all of our largest textiles. And so Hattie and I both brought in lots of fabrics and just started covering the floor. And then we were layering artworks on top of that.
And did you have like an inspiration or something, or was it really like this creative process where you thought, okay, how do we want to use the floor and that's how we do it? Or
yeah, I think it was born out of trying to be adaptive and flexible, and to challenge how we use the gallery space. I mean, if you don't have the audience navigating through the space, what else can you do? And how can you be creative? And if you can't allow people into the space, which we couldn't at the time, how do you activate that space in a new way? And then what are the vantage points for whatever audience is in the facility to be able to view it. And that was pretty obvious right away that the vantage point was that second floor look over. And for context, this gallery space is 1,000 square feet. And it's tough to tell in this photos, but it is 2 stories high. So recognizing that the best way to present the work was flat floor based that could be photographed and viewed better than any other sort of arrangement could have been for a closed gallery.
Mm-hmm. And you used a lot of textile, right? Is there a reason? I feel like textile is really cool. Like you want to, I mean, it's called seen but not felt. Like if I see textile, I want to touch it right away.
Well, Heather, I'll let you speak to this, and Hattie as well. But I know the first issue was, how do you protect artworks and keep them? How do you handle them appropriately and are not just laying them on the floor? So we needed to come up with a device to protect the works from being laid directly on the floor. So I think that was one of the first objectives. But then Hattie and Heather, you can probably speak to also the layering that was happening within the combination of works anyways, and how the fabric worked in with that.
Yeah, so we did start with the textile foundation of the fabrics, but then also when we invited artists that were included in the show, we proposed it as a work that is made to be on the floor, which a lot of them had already been doing some sort of rug artwork or different weavings and that kind of thing. Already had pieces that were made to be displayed on the floor. And then other people said, well, I'm okay with this being on the floor, especially if it's not going to be stepped over or stepped on. And it was interesting to see each person that we invited approach it with their own creative technique and what they chose to allow us to curate in. And so that was also a challenge. There are some paper, some letterpress works on paper and some photographic prints, a print of a gouache painting. So it's not all fabrics, but many people did have something fabric already that they wanted to include. So they all, yeah. Don't know if that's answering the question, but.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, did you have a big picture or a vision in mind, or how did you deal with like small details and corners and like really let's say local arrangements, and then the big one, you know?
To be honest, it was more collecting everything and then just collaging it together. Like we knew that it was going to be covering the whole floor. That was the objective, but cohesively. So for me, I just I have this personal style with my own work where you just make what you have work together. Somehow it always comes out okay. So that was exciting for me, was I have all of these different, very diverse works of art, but how can we complement them with each other by the way that we arrange them in this large floor space? So we did curate and we did choose which works we thought would be best together, but then they still looked, just looking at each artwork, that was curated in the show, we still didn't know exactly how they were going to fit until we started just moving them around and collaging them together in the space. So it was forethought. We did curate which works, but then also the floor, the foundational materials that we used, we just had a lot to choose from. So then we weren't limiting ourselves with which patterns or color palettes we were able to choose from our background too, and then adding all the works on top of that. It was a very hands-on experience once we had all the materials we could work with in the space.
And so oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I would add to it, especially because Hattie is being pretty humble. And so I have to fill in. Hattie Hattie herself had made 2 needle punch rugs that are in the exhibition and 1 painted floor cloth. But then also we had these resources in our community. So Lisa Nelson Raba, who had before she even became a graduate student at Bradley, she had made a lot of gorgeous rugs. And she was thinking, well, I'll just let the curators choose from among my rugs. But as we were talking, especially with our graduate student group on Friday afternoons, Hattie and I ended up telling Lisa, just bring all of them. And so we, as Hattie was describing, we had a lot of raw material that we could start with. And both Hattie and I work improvisationally. And so that's why it didn't seem so daunting for us. We knew that if we just looked at all of the artwork and all of our fabrics and extra rugs and everything else that was there as raw material that we were going to collage together, we would make something really beautiful and enjoyable, because that's how we both work in our own practices. And what I'd like to point out even though the entire installation was almost like a quilt itself or a collage itself, within the larger work were these smaller vignettes. And so in the image on the right here, first of all, you see Nina's artwork is in the top portion, the terracotta colored piece. It's a paper casting on top of the turquoise fabric. And then just below that is this collage of letterpress works by Heather Ford. But Hattie is the one who collaged them together. So again, Heather Ford provided us with a lot of these letterpress artworks on paper. And she, like the other artists participating in the show, gave us permission to arrange them the way that we wanted. And we were collaging or almost painting with their artworks. So Hattie created this collage with those works that, as you can tell, there's contrast with what it was laid on top of, but then visually it flows into the turquoise fabric, and then that turquoise fabric frames Nina's work. So there are also these smaller compositions within the giant composition.
Yeah, and I was wondering, are there sometimes also artworks overlapping? Or because I remember that when I showed photos of this exhibition to my friends, the one question I got very often was, oh, but how do you separate your work from, it's a group show, but then, you know, don't you need a photo of your work so you can put it on your website? And I thought, I don't know, do I? And then that motivated me to talk about it in more depth. And I also was wondering, like, I really liked how you said you could play with our and the others, like people's artworks, and then how did this play work? So yeah, sorry, this question got really long.
Well, this is one example. This is one example of one person's artwork on another person's. Hattie, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so several of the artists we knew would be okay with us layering their work together, or we had permission to, like Heather had said, display them how it was basically like, here's the piece, you can put it in the space however you want. So as we went, some of them naturally went together if it was a textile piece like Lisa's, and then add Nicole's artwork, stackable artwork on top of that. It seemed like a natural, Heather liked to say, forced collaboration between the artists. So some of the artworks are more isolated, or some of them lended to being put together in a collaborative way in the space. But then as a whole, everyone was collaborating anyway, because that was part of the premise of the call to be in the show. So I felt like everybody was pretty open to having this collage to get together. Yeah, and I hadn't even thought about the question, like you said, like, do you have to have it isolated and take a photo of it? For me, the outpouring of doing this exhibition was just that it would be a collage of it together. And that's the idea of us all going through this experience of our world events together too, and how we long for that touching and that that coming together in any way that we can. So it just felt like a natural response to that with the works that these artists have created.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off what Hattie just said. It's interesting. I don't think any of us realized in the conception of the show, but we really, the longing for being together and being close, we couldn't. But it's funny that our artwork ended up hugging, overlapping, touching together in an intimate way. That was not something that was planned in the beginning at all, but it really, the need for that must have driven this project to create that sort of enveloped hug of the work all together. And it was a really beautiful thing to realize.
And how did, I feel like once you start to work with a material, you get to know it, and then maybe, did you have, for example, different rounds of arrangement, and with each one, did your feeling for the works and materials change? Like, how did this process evolve? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't remember now how many days we took that we were even in there. Heather, do you remember? two days? There were a few times where we had to step away because we'd been looking at everything so long. And we stepped out and then came back to it and approached it freshly. And then that way we could make different connections between the pieces and the underlying fabrics when we came back. But I just remember that it was just trying to keep that, also the playfulness of experimenting with all of these pieces together. And yeah, we rearranged and moved things around a lot over the space of, I think it was probably 2 days with some adjustments after that.
Yeah, there was a lot of preparatory work, but in a couple days is where we put in most of the work, long stretches of time together, moving things around. And sometimes that I've done a lot of collaborative installations, and to me it's always interesting that sometimes the participants check with each other and sometimes they don't, and it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see how that develops. When do I say, oh, Hattie, is it okay if I move this? And when do I just move it and see if she notices? And there's this kind of fun play that way as well. And then noticing, saying, oh, Hattie, I see you put this here. And then there's this negotiation, this very playful negotiation that goes on. The other thing, Hattie, I remember doing with you is we would sometimes photograph compositions because we knew we were going to change things, but we still liked how it was in that moment. And so we wanted to just capture that, even though we were about to change, because we were about to change it, but we just liked that, these separate compositions. So when I was going through photos to put together this PowerPoint, I thought, oh, I don't remember that one. Oh, that was one where we changed it right after. We were just taking snapshots because we liked how it looked.
Yeah, and of course, with the nature of this exhibition, there was a lot of running up the stairs to look from above and seeing how it looked through the lens. If something compositionally wasn't making sense, then we could see it looking from how we were going to show it to viewers. So also looking in from the window outside off and on, and then going back in and moving things around if it wasn't feeling quite right.
And it's fun, isn't it fun to be able to use other people's artwork? And then, I mean, what's the like, imagine you had all the artworks from this exhibition, but you would put them on the wall. And if you imagine it now, like what did this type of exhibition setting give you, and how does it differ from the other setting?
I feel like just because of the nature of how we approached the statement of this exhibition, it felt so free. Like the artist knew that we were going to move around, and also we could use varied fabrics in the background. It didn't have to be the standard white wall, or like it was already going to be different. So why not make it really different, I guess, in my perspective, as we approached what this show would look like, because everything was different already in the world. So why not just amp it up a little bit?
Artists are so resilient. That is the message here. Yeah, creativity fosters resilience. So yeah, Hattie has done installations with her own fabric where she covers an entire wall in a gallery. So it's not as if she wouldn't be capable of doing that, or that I wouldn't be capable of doing that. But yeah, we wanted to take advantage of this space that usually artists they also can't use much of the floor space. So in another way, it was exploiting an opportunity we normally would not have. Mm-hmm. So it's looking at it from the other side of the coin in a way. But yes, it was easy. It was easy to move things around. It was easy to lay things flat. So that was an advantage to working on the floor. So that actually made it, if we had to attach all of these things to a wall, it would have taken a lot more time. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure we would have composed things completely differently as well.
Let me think of it last. Oh yeah, because before we open up to general questions and to the audience to have a broader discussion, but I wanted to know, because I have some like questions I've been collecting answers for over here as well, but in German, of course. But I've been wondering what makes exhibitions exciting to you guys. Because I find that really, I found out that it's very different to people. When does an exhibition become exciting to you? When is there this magic about it?
I'll begin. Yeah, it really is so subjective, I think, and so personal for each individual. And for me, when an exhibition is quote unquote good or interesting, I think it's something that I just know deep down, and someone else may not have the same reaction to it, but for me, it's something that really resonates and stirs something within me. And that stirring can be a range of emotions. It doesn't have to be a good stirring. It can be sorrow, it can be elation, it can be reverence. But it's just something that I know. And I think over the years, I've really found that the exhibitions where I walk in and I don't have that reaction right away, that, oh, this is wonderful, I'm so excited by this, they turn out to be the exhibitions that in the long run, I have to do more research about. I have to look into farther, and I have to read more or talk to the artist. And those are the ones that don't always have an impact right away, actually in the long run, they do more for me, because I think that challenges what the internal me just thinks is good, if I push myself to understand something that I don't have that initial reaction to, I benefit from it as well.
Yeah, nice. Something that challenges us, right?
Yeah, I think that that is very true. And Erin, I've tried to explain that exact thing to my students, where something that you don't necessarily have a positive reaction to right away, if you spend more time with it, and if you are curious about it, and if you do the research, if you investigate more, you often find it to be even more rewarding than something that that gives you a response, an instant response. And I think that this exhibition, even though there is so much visual stimuli, and there is a lot of color, a lot of what you could interpret as joy, it was challenging as well. And so there was an image, oh, here's another arrangement. There was an image of a skull that became very clear as you were looking from the second floor overlook. I'm going to go to an overall image again. There was an image of a skull, for example. There were several images from Trish Williams' Plenty Plenty in 2020 series, and you can tell that there are references to COVID. So there's a figure and lungs, and what at first seems very pretty, this red lace, that you understand after, if you give it some thought, you realize, oh, that's representing the COVID virus. And so there's a lot of levels to this exhibition. It is a COVID exhibition. I think I keep telling people COVID is the context for everything. We wish that were not the case, but it is. And so there are a lot of levels to how people experience this work emotionally and intellectually. So even though it might seem just visually pleasing, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's why when you told me about the idea in last fall, I don't know. I didn't know at that moment. I thought you would put like sculptures into a gallery space, something like that. But of course, you put textile makes so much sense in this context, especially when lots of us have had to live in isolation. It's the material that you want to touch like immediately.
This is a little bit silly, but I remember watching Nina all wrapped up in blankets because her heat was broken in her apartment. And that's how we experienced each other. Yeah, in our international artist group, a lot of us were wrapped up on our couches. But yeah, there is this sense of comfort that comes from textiles, rugs, quilts, and just textiles themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I've looked at the time, and we have a few people here as well who joined us in the Zoom. So how about we also see if somebody else has a question to you guys.
While we're waiting for people that might be interested in asking a question directly, we have some questions that I'd like to read from the comments, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Joanne would like to know specifically, outside of the window, and maybe one of the curators would be best for answering this. Is the gold or brass work by the window outside, does it reflect a specific culture out? I believe that they're speaking of outside.
Yeah, so if you could go back to the picture. It's actually copper. Cutout isn't the correct term. Maybe Heather can help me, but Heather Ford's artwork is copper cutouts. And it's not a cultural reflection. It's from some of her other work regarding, maybe Heather can explain better.
Sure, and they are cut, they're laser cut,
Yeah,
but the shapes come from data that she is recording of different brain waves. And so each of these cutouts, she wrapped the data in a circle digitally, and then she had them cut out of copper into these shapes. And she's another artist who gave us free range. She said, you can stack them, you can lay them out the way that you want. And we chose to put them near the window because they are reflective of the light. And so we wanted to exploit the quality of the material, but we felt there was an affinity between the copper of these shapes and the brass piece on Mia Congo's work. And Mia Congo, Erin curated Mia into the exhibition. So Erin, I don't know if you want to speak to Mia's work because you know more about it.
Yeah, Mia is an artist that actually the first year that I was at Bradley, received a proposal from her and was really interested in a lot of the cast ceramic work that she was doing, and mixed with, at the time, she was using a lot of felt materials, floor-based, and also doing different drawings. And so as soon as this exhibition, we had the idea for the exhibition, we started to brainstorm who are some of the artists that we want to begin thinking about inviting, and then work out from there. And some of the artists, Nina and Nicholas Nyland, and then Mia, were foundational artists for this show that really inspired us. And having worked with Mia before, she was just a joy to work with. And then it gave an opportunity to reach out and see where her work was. And luckily, she's very busy right now. She's in Chicago, but luckily she was able to lend us this piece for the show. So we felt very fortunate that we were able to include this. So this was a foundational piece for how we grew the vision for the exhibition. And I know we talked briefly about how it evolved and even was constructed in the gallery, but really Hattie and I were able to build an inventory of the works as the artists provided us works that were available for consideration. And we spent time creating a form where we could not only see the images together in this form, but also try and understand the scale and put other information together on this document so that we could make those decisions before they came into the gallery, to then make the additional decisions of how everything worked together. Yes.
Okay, and then there's not so much a question, more of a statement. Jerry said there's a sense of play and discovery in the layout, which I would definitely agree with. And then a question to go along with that, Miriam wondered, art galleries usually have white/beige walls. What are the thoughts behind using such varied color and fabrics as a background instead of using a white textile?
Heather, do you want to jump in on this? Because I think a lot of the materials, we started with a lot of things that you had available for us to use.
Yeah, well, it was kind of equal what Hattie and I brought for the foundation of fabrics, and we both knew right away. Actually, Hattie tried to sneak in some white fabrics and I kept covering them up. I didn't want any white. But the reason is that we were approaching this as one large piece. So to unify the whole work, we wanted the whole thing to be about the interaction of the colors and textures. And so, yeah, the colors, the textures, the patterns, we knew from the beginning that that was going to be a part of it. Part of it was that we knew that we had so much material to begin with, but we certainly could have chosen, we could have chosen all flat color, or we could have chosen to utilize even just the pale gray of the floor, or to use white fabric, but that would have separated the artists, and our purpose was to bring them all together.
Yeah, wonderful. And then Kay would like to know, what are you going to do with this art when the show is over?
So the works have been returned to the artists, or in the process of going back to the artists, but I'd really like to think that the work exists online now. The exhibition exists online. It is something else that hopefully has longevity in its own right, since it is a virtual exhibition. So the artworks are back with their owners, and now it exists online for hopefully audiences to enjoy longer than COVID times, hopefully long past COVID times.
Wonderful. And Joanne would like to know if Hattie could explain how culture influenced her work.
Yeah, so I have 3 rugs that we put in here, and they reference a lot of Cherokee beadwork references, as well as basketry, a lot of basketry patterns from Cherokee traditional reed work. And like this one on this photo is referencing that, as well as I think a lot about places I've traveled and their textile cultures, different influences there. But I look at a lot of basketry references or Cherokee historical references, and then I translate it through my diaspora lens of all of these other textiles and color palettes and things that I thrift from my Peoria community and everything. So those all get put into a new visual language through my standing as someone that grew up 3 generations outside of the tribal community. And that's also why I really love doing this project, because I'm constantly thinking about how our communities influence us, and everybody's coming with a different cultural background, of different cultural values, different perspectives. And I just love that my perspective as part of the Cherokee Nation got to be surrounded by all of these other cultures and experiences by people that I got to come in contact with from Peoria. So since I am living in Peoria, it wouldn't have happened somewhere else exactly like this. So I am constantly thinking about culture and community in that respect.
Thank you, Hattie. If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to unmute yourself now, and we'd be happy to answer those questions.
The image that's on the center of our screen now, what type of art is that? Is that ink on a floor cloth or what?
I'll answer that. So this is a close-up. On the right it's a close-up of, on the left, what you see is a very long painted floor cloth. So this is artist Nicholas Nyland, who he was influenced by the American tradition of painted floor cloths. He's influenced by folk art and traditional arts. But obviously this is a very contemporary painting on a floor cloth. So there may be some ink. I think it's a combination of ink, paint, spray paint. This was layers and layers of paint and tape to create this very complex imagery. And so that's why I wanted to be sure to have a detail in this slide, but you can see that the floor cloth itself is, I think, something like 15 feet long.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
Does one of us want to share Lori Waxman's review?
Yeah, I'm happy to read it.
Okay.
So this is a wonderful review that we just received recently from Lori Waxman, and it's featured on her blog, 60-word minute art critic. But then Heather, where it was featured on, remind me the name of the publication, New City Art Review as well recently.
Yeah, newcity.com. So it was on art.newcity.com. And also Lori, she was doing a COVID version of her 60 words per minute art critic. And Lori is very supportive of artists. And so the COVID version focused on exhibitions that were somehow affected by COVID. And we were actually one of the final reviews. She's actually done. So the last publication of the COVID version of this project included us and a couple of other exhibitions. But yeah, newcity.com is where it's published.
Thank you, Heather. I'll read this. This is just a wonderful review. We were privileged to have this. So Lori wrote, art spaces have spent the past year figuring out how to share the work on their walls with an audience that, due to measures of public safety, could not be physically present. Is there a more beautiful solution than that of the Bradley University galleries? To fill the void left by visitors, curators Erin Buczynski and Hattie Lee installed, seen but not felt, on every square inch of flooring, creating somebody, how do I say that word? Gesamtkunstwerk. Did I butcher that, Nina?
Gesamtkunstwerk.
Perfect. Thank you. Out of the overlapping textiles, prints, reliefs, small assemblages, and quilts of 14 artists, themselves included. Photos of the exhibition, which can also be seen in person through the gallery's ground floor windows and by students from a second floor catwalk, reveal a thrillingly cacophonic patchwork, a crowd of strangers, a scene of artworks laying across one another, mingling freely without concern, without a schematic. It's impossible to know who made what, but it hardly matters in the face of so much desperately missed, if totally surrogate, collective touching. I want to be that art.
That is beautiful. Congratulations to all of you on that, and also the show itself. So thank you everyone for attending Art Club today. A huge thank you to Erin, Nina, Hattie, and Heather for presenting their amazing work and their curatorial work. Be sure to tune in next month, Tuesday, June 8th at 1 p.m. when we host artist Jim Rar for a special presentation of their work. Thanks also to museum members and Visionary Society members for their continued support making virtual programming like this possible. Thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you, Heather.
Bye. Thank you.